Moin from Donspektor. Today I do have something a little bit different, and technically it's not really a review, it's more kind of a discussion, and it's about, are custom tips really worth it? And yeah, what are custom tips for anyone who does not know what custom ear tips are? You usually are mounting ear tips on your IEM, usually, as I said. And with those, you do get, like with the pair of IEMs, you usually get a random selection of ear tips. Like, may they be silicone, rubber, foam, or whatever. Usually do get a small selection or a large selection, depending on obviously how much you pay. And custom ear tips just mean they are customly made for your ear. So yeah, and I think there are three main key points you should think about if you even consider having custom ear tips made. The first one obviously is, how often are you using your IEMs? Doesn't matter if you just use it like twice a week or 4 times a week. Like, I only think it's really worth to have custom ear tips made if you use them regularly. And the second question is, how comfortable are you with the ear tips you have? So assuming you do have a few IEMs, then you do have a medium or small selection of tips like this one. And if you do have a pair of tips which works for you, but without any problems for all IEMs you have, then I also think you should not consider having custom ear tips made. Because why should you get something customly made if you already have something which is comfortable for you and you have no problems with it? And the third point I think is important to consider is, how much do you like the sound of your IEMs with the tips you prefer? So I just give you a small example. The Shanling ME500, I do like them with the foam tips or with a really small version of the silicone tips it comes with. However, if I add the custom tips, I do lose the not too much soundstage they have, or like the medium soundstage they have, and I do gain a more forward, upper mid, and lower treble region. And this IEM is already pretty like forward in the upper mid and lower treble and treble, so that is a bit too much for me. So here I definitely prefer the tips I do have, like the non-custom versions. Obviously I do also have customs, but yeah. So yes, that's the third point. What I would not consider in any shape is how expensive your IEMs are. And I think this is like an aspect, like many people will probably tell you you should not get a pair of custom ear tips if you do have a pair of TIN T2 or whatever. But I kindly disagree with that. Because if you really like the sound signature your IEM has, why buy something else? If you are really confident, like you found something you really do love, like why change the in-ear just because somebody tells you to buy something more expensive? I mean, it might be better, but it also might not. So just stick with the IEM you like, and if you don't agree with its comfort, or if you can't wear it for too long, like my problem with most IEMs, I just can't wear them for too long, then you should consider having a pair of custom tips made. So having the general questions out of the way, let's just come to the custom tips in general. Like, what do you get for what you actually are paying for? So first, we should probably discuss how expensive custom tips can be. Just pronouncing here can, because I'm a EU citizen, and more on that, I'm a German citizen, and that means my prices will probably differ from the prices you have if you are not from Germany. So let's discuss like the parts, or like the different aspects I had to pay for to get this customly made pair of ear tips. So first, obviously, there's shipment. I did order my pair of custom tips at Custom Art. They are from Poland. And I've heard from people who recommended them that they are pretty famous for what they are doing, but I have no clue. I'm not super into the whole IEM game. And yeah, so shipment first, and I had to pay €12.50 from shipment from them in Poland to me in Germany. Then I also had to add €5 shipment for the imprints I had made at the audiologist to ship from me to Poland. So that's just shipment. So say €17.50 just for shipment. So yeah, the next biggest aspect would be having the imprints made. I just went to a random audiologist near me. He was like, oh, okay, I've never even had anybody here who wanted to have just custom tips made. But apparently, he obviously didn't know how to make the imprints. So yeah, then you have the imprints made. And this, he had like in a silicone gel or something like that. And he just squeezes into your ear, and then it just has to harden for a couple of minutes, and then you're already done. Like all in all, it took me like 10 minutes, including waiting, to have the imprints made. Yes, and price-wise, I had to pay €27. I have heard people paid less. Like I've read somebody who paid like 18 or 19 euros to have the imprints made, but I've also heard people paying like 50 euros or so to have imprints made. So this is pretty like a large factor you should consider. Like it won't always be just 27 euros. So yes, and obviously then there's the biggest part of the whole bill, which is the tips themselves. And I had to pay 75 euros for my pair of tips, which is definitely, like, I don't want to say it's cheap, right? You could get, for the price I paid overall now, you could definitely get a pair of Starfields and a pair of spin fit tips, if you do like those, maybe. Or a pair of Complete Foam tips. I don't know, like, I do have a pair of Complete Foam tips, probably somewhere in here. I have the round ones. And yeah, they're too big for my ear, to be honest. Like, I bought them, and obviously you can't return them, and now they're too big, and they just stay there until I find something that maybe fit me, but yeah, that's another story. So yes, all in all, I did pay what is it like? Wait, let me just use my calculator. Obviously I could do math in my head, but why should I? So it's 27 plus 12.50 plus 5 and plus 75. Let me guess, like 120 euros, like roughly 120 euros I had to pay for this pair of tips. So yes, that's just the price I had to pay. I think it could be less if you are maybe from Poland, when you will obviously pay less for shipment, and most likely also less just price-wise, because you have to pay less taxes. Probably, I'm not entirely sure. But it could also be, I don't want to say significantly more, but it could definitely be more. Just assuming you are from Spain or something like that, then you will obviously have to pay more for shipping, and you might also have to pay more for imprints. Like, it really depends on the audiologist you are. So yes, that's how much you have to pay for, or like I had to pay like 120 euros for this pair of tips. And yeah, to just give you an example for what IEMs I'm using this pair with. I'm using it with the Ice Audio H40, and also interesting, those are made for a specific pair. So they probably do have 3D scans of the IEMs you do have, and then they produce them to exactly fit the angle those are going to insert into your ear. Like, do I have the right side here? No, that's left. Okay, so like this. They would insert like this into your ear, and they should have scans of this thing to know how it is shaped. Yeah, and what you do get, like, let's go to the next chapter. What you do get if you buy a pair of custom tips, obviously you get the perfect fit. I had to get used to just the like relatively deep and angled insertion. That's something, it's always a bit weird to just put it in my ear, but as soon as you put it into your ear, it just sits, you know, it's perfect. There is no itching, there's no scratching, it just perfectly sits in my ear. That is the first thing you get. Second thing you get, obviously, some really good isolation. I would say it's probably comparable to something like foam tips, like the tin tips here. They do isolate pretty well, and I think you get a comparable isolation. Obviously, depending on factors like how big the IEM is, how far it reduces into ear, and other things. But for those, for those I've had them made for, they do isolate as well as foam tips. So, but what you also get, what I mentioned before, you do get a change in sound signature. And for this particular pair, it means the upper mids gain a tiny bit of energy. I don't know, like I would say maybe like 10%, like it's barely noticeable. Like I just know they do get a tiny bit more energy. And at the same time, here also I do lose a bit of soundstage width. Like the depth I do keep, and I'm not entirely sure if I do get more depth. It's really like on like the verge of, sometimes I feel like I do have more depth, but less width. And mostly I do think it just have a tiny bit less width, but the same amount of depth. So that is what happens to this particular pair of IEMs. And now you might ask, and you rightfully ask, but if this nozzle is like, what is it, 4.7 millimeters, and I do have an IEM which has like 4.8 or 5 millimeters nozzle, can I use the tips as well? So let me just grab another pair with a completely different sound signature. The T2 Plus has a nozzle which is, I think, 5 millimeters. Like it does look a tiny bit bigger. And yes, you can, right, do I have the right side? No, that's the left side. So let's just grab right side. You can obviously also put the tips on this pair of IEMs. It will just hold there because the diameter here is pretty similar, like, or almost the same, like just look bigger, but it could also be just, I don't know, like optical illusions. No clue. And yes, you could fit them on others, and they will also have similar advantages or disadvantages, obviously depending on how your ear canal is shaped, but they will not be as good as for the pair of IEMs you had them made. Because obviously here the angle is different than here. I think, I'm not entirely sure if you will be able to see it in the camera. Like it's definitely different angle, like a different angle of insertion, and this will obviously stay the same angle, so you might get a worse fit. Like it depends on the kind of IEMs you have. And in my experience, however, it does not really affect the fit too much. Like I've worn the custom tips with the pair of T2 Plus here. I've worn with the Jade Audios, where they also fitted on because it's similar diameter. I've worn them with the T4s, and I forgot another pair. Oh yes, the Eisen Audio D10s. And they did work for all of them. Obviously for some better, for some worse, like the D10s, they do have a definitely wider insertion into ear than those. So there, the D10s did stuck a bit far out of my ear. But yeah, that's, I think, everything I can recommend you, or I can suggest you. And also my experience with custom tips so far. Like it's, if you would ask me like, or to come back to a question, is it worth it? I would say it depends on the first 3 points I mentioned, like how often and how long are you wearing your IEMs? How comfortable are you with your IEMs, like with the tips you have? And how much do you like the sound signature of your IEM in detail? And if you can answer the first question with like pretty often, the second question with like, not too comfortable, it could be better. And third question with, you know, I don't mind having maybe a bit less soundstage or maybe a bit more soundstage. It all depends on the ear you're having. Then you should definitively get a pair of custom tips. However, if you answer one of these questions like negatively or like not super positive, then I think it's not worth grabbing a pair of custom tips. Just because 120 euros for me, maybe less for you or maybe more for you, you could also get a pair of Starfields or anything else, like anything else obviously in like 100 euro or 150 euro price range. Or if you just want one pair you just like, then you could maybe grab a pair like the Legacy Freeze as custom for about the same price. Those will obviously not be silicone, that's a difference, but they will also be custom made to your ear, and that could also be something you should consider. Obviously it depends on if you want to use tips on more than just one IEM, then yeah, you maybe should get, there's only a possibility you have like just normal ear tips or custom ear tips. So yes, for me, I would say, was it worth it? I would slightly say yes. I think I do like the H40s more with this pair of tips, and especially for long listening sessions when I'm at work, definitively I would prefer the custom ear tips over the foam tips, over the small silicone tips, over the small foam tips here. Like, they're all inferior just comfort-wise to the custom ear tips. And yeah, that's about it, what I had to say about custom ear tips and if they are worth it or not. If you have any questions, remarks, or anything else, just feel free to use the comments. And that's about it for today. Donspektor out.